Yo, what's up, guys? Today I'm going to be ranking all the fighters from the K-drama Weak Hero. I'll be covering both Season 1 and Season 2, ranking all fighters from weakest to strongest. So if you've ever wondered who would win in a fight between someone like Gum Song-jae from Season 2 and Suho from Season 1, stick around, we're going to be getting to the bottom of all those matchups in this video. Spoiler alert, Suho gets destroyed and it's not even close. Also, I just wanted to say I did not rank people like Han Tae-hoon and Lee Jong-chan. I just don't fucking care about them. I'm sorry, I just couldn't care less. So at the bottom of this list, we have Shion with his fists only from Season 2, Episode 2. And by the way, just to clarify, when I say Shion with his fists, I don't mean Shion like analyzing his opponent's shoulder like he did to Woo Young and to Choi Hyo-man eventually. I mean literally just unarmed Shion until he analyzes his opponent's shoulder. This guy's just feetless, really. Above him would be his Season 1 self when he has a weapon, like a pen or a bar or something like that. He would obviously be above his unarmed self since Shion is shown to carry weapons around and tries to use them as much as he can in fights, which shows he finds them more convenient. But above him would be Choi Hyo-man from Season 2. I've seen many people mocking Hyo-man saying he's trash, but he's actually pretty underrated in my opinion. While he is made out to be a complete joke, we see that before unarmed Shion actually uses Suho's advice and tries to analyze Hyoman's shoulder, Hyoman just completely blitzes Shion to the point he can't even react. And while it may at first glance appear like Shion was just taking Hyoman's hits on purpose, I think it's much more probable that he simply couldn't keep up with Hyoman's speed. I mean, think about it. Why on earth would Shion start a fight with Hyoman and threaten him just to stand there and let him strike him in the face? That's just ridiculous. And it's so out of character for Shion, considering the reason Season 1 happened the way it did was because Shion refused to be bitched around by anyone. The fact that Shion, when he actually did analyze Hyoman's shoulder, dodged out of the way instead of letting himself get hit, is just more proof that it wasn't his desire to just take hits. Since once he actually finds a way to nullify Hyoman's attacks, he takes it instantly. And finally, we also see Shion tank hits in a similar way when Songjae strikes him. And we know prior to this happening, he attempted to stab Songjae with a pen. So it's not like this is him just letting Songjae hit him, since he was shown to combat Songjae before he took those hits. So to summarize, Shion has no logical reason to take Hyoman's hits on purpose. It's super out of character for him, and the fact that he eventually does dodge out the way just shows that he didn't want to get hit, but simply couldn't react. And to put the nail in the coffin, we see Shion right after engaging in combat with Songjae, taking hits from him in the same seemingly frozen manner that he took hits from Hyoman. So I think it's pretty clear that he initially got blitzed by Hyoman but ended up dodging him once he used the tip Suho gave him. So yeah, for that reason Hyoman would be where he is. And you may be asking, why is Hyoman above weapon Shion when he only beats up an unarmed Shion? And that's a good question because they are obviously two different fighters. But that's because Hyoman is shown to have relativity to shoulder analyzing Shion, who outscales his weapon self. Allow me to explain this. We see that in Season 1, when Shion attacks Woo Young with a weapon, he gets completely bitched and can't put up a fight at all, not even able to dodge a hit or anything. But when he actually applies Suho's teachings and analyzes Woo Young's shoulder the second time they fight, he's able to instantly dodge a hit from Woo Young and grapple him for a few seconds. While this isn't anything special, it's still better than anything he was shown to do with a weapon. Excluding, of course, the shoelace and dumbbell, those are different versions. He's great with those, but this is just talking about the pen or metal bar specifically. So for this reason, we can say that Shion, when analyzing his opponent's shoulder, is stronger than his weapon self from Season 1. So now that I've established that Shion, when analyzing his opponent's shoulder, is superior to his Season 1 self, I'll explain why Hyoman is relative to Shion when analyzing his opponent's shoulder and therefore outscales Season 1 weapon Shion. We see that Shion, when he analyzes Hyoman's shoulder, is able to evade his attack. And while he does dodge him, he isn't actually shown to be capable of doing anything else. Basically, all we see from their exchange is him dodging Hyoman, but there is no proof that he could have actually landed a hit on Hyoman, as he doesn't, so to say he could is just an assumption. Basically, in their encounter, Hyoman and Shion were technically equal. As while Shion did evade him, he didn't do anything back to him. Simply being able to dodge someone doesn't mean you outscale them, since what good is dodging your opponent if you can't return an attack anyway? It just means the fight will most likely turn into an endless wild goose chase with one fighter just dodging the other but not landing a hit in return, thus resulting in them being relative. Some people argue that Shion wasn't trying to fight Hyoman seriously, and that he was simply trying to evade him without counterattacking. They point to the fact that Shion dodges Hyoman's strike but doesn't follow up with an attack. But this interpretation assumes that Shion was holding back against Hyoman, and that doesn't align with his character at all. Shion has consistently shown that he's not one to take it easy on someone who gets under his skin. He also clearly doesn't have some sort of soft spot towards Hyoman, considering that by the end of Season 1 he gets frustrated at Hyoman's predictable character, and the episode before he gets into this fight with Hyoman, he literally fantasizes about stabbing Hyoman with a pen. So the idea he'd go easy, especially on someone like Hyoman, is just silly. I've also heard people say that Shion didn't retaliate because he was trying to protect Juntae, but if protecting Juntae was really his goal, the smartest move would be to take Hyoman out as quickly and decisively as possible. Simply dodging leaves too much risk. If Shion failed to maintain evasion, Hyoman could easily return to beating Juntae, which is something he supposedly is trying to stop. And funnily enough, remember when I said he fantasized about stabbing Hyoman? The reason he did that was because Hyoman was harassing Juntae, which shows that if anything, he would want to attack Hyoman if Hyoman was harassing Juntae, which he was. And as I said before, he clearly doesn't like Hyoman, so I see no reason for him to try not to hurt him. That's just silly. So due to the fact that Shion is shown to not be afraid to take things to the complete extreme, coupled with the fact that he's shown to by no means like Hyoman, and that if he wanted to defend Juntae, the best move would be to disable Hyoman, we can say that the most likely reason for Shion's lack of counter-attacking is that he wasn't confident he could land a hit without being countered or overwhelmed, thus putting Hyoman and shoulder analyzing Shion on the same level. And yes, while it's true that we don't have 100% proof that Shion can't eventually counterattack, that argument cuts both ways, and we could just as easily say there's also not 100% proof that Hyoman will always miss, and there is a chance that he might actually eventually land on Shion. So this argument cuts both ways. At the end of the day, they're shown to be relative in this encounter, so to appeal to one of them being better would just be cherry picking. So now that I've explained that Hyoman is relative to Shion when Shion analyzes his opponent's shoulder, and I've also explained that Shion, when analyzing his opponent's shoulder, is superior to his Season 1 weapon self, it would obviously follow that Hyoman is above Shion's Season 1 weapon self. That took way longer than it should have, but hey, whatever. Now in this tier we have Fatigued Suho at the bottom. I personally believe that Suho, when he fought Gilsu, was nerfed in some way, and I say this for a few reasons. Firstly, we see that Suho is visibly out of breath and panting before he fights Gilsu. And while he is fatigued, he's shown to lose to Gilsu, the same guy who loses to Sokde in that same episode, who Suho was able to defeat when he wasn't in this state. It just doesn't make sense. If Suho was truly healthy, he wouldn't have lost to Gilsu, the same guy who loses to Sokde, who Suho previously beat when he wasn't fatigued. Because of the fact that we see Suho is out of breath, we can use this as a way to explain this. And the amount of fatigue would in fact be quantifiable because, like I said, he's shown to, when not fatigued, beat Sokde. So we know that he would have been able to win against Gilsu had he not been fatigued. While fatigued Suho isn't at his best, he should still scale above the likes of Choi Hyoman and Shion when he analyzes his opponent's shoulder, as we see that Suho, while he does lose to Gilsu, is able to put up a fight and go blow for blow with him and fight relative with him. And we know Gilsu fought on par with Sokde, and we know Sokde would be relative to the likes of Base Wooyoung due to fighting on par with a healthy Suho, who is relative to Base Wooyoung. And Base Wooyoung was able to get the upper hand on Shion when Shion analyzed his shoulder. So basically, the likes of fatigued Suho, Gilsu, Sokde, and Wooyoung are relative, and Wooyoung is shown to be far better than Shion when Shion analyzes his opponent's shoulder. Above fatigued Suho there would be Gilsu, as Gilsu is able to get the upper hand against the fatigued Suho when they fight, despite Shion interfering. Above Gilsu there would be Sokde, as he is shown to defeat Gilsu when they fight, to the point that Gilsu resorts to using a knife. Sokde is also able to somewhat press Suho, but above him would be Base Wooyoung, as he put up a better fight against Suho than Sokde did, and completely destroyed Base Season 1 weapon Shion. And at the top of this tier we have Suho. He is shown to get the upper hand against Wooyoung as he knocked Wooyoung down before their fight was interrupted. And yes, I know it might seem a bit weird to see him solo. There are so many new characters in Season 2 that haven't been mentioned yet, and Suho's in one of the lowest tiers. But I personally believe that the Season 2 characters just completely gap the top tiers from Season 1 like Suho, and I'll get around to explaining that. Like, I literally believe that people like Songjae and the fat guy who fought Shion in season 2, episode 8 would like triple neg Suho or something. By triple neg, I mean like they'd be able to neg someone who'd be able to neg someone who'd be able to neg Suho. Like, I don't know if it's triple or double or quadruple. Like, off the top of my head, I can't even say. But they just fucking gap Suho so hard. Like, it's insane. And you guys will see why in this video because I'm going to be explaining it. Yeah, there's just so much power cliffing. It's actually insane. So now at the bottom of this tier, we have season 2, episode 2, Pen Shion and Go Hyun-tak. I'm seeing a few people act like Shion's improvement in season 2 is unquantifiable, but this is just not the case at all. So first of all, we need to re-establish where season 1 base weapon Shion is. So basically Pen Shion and Metal Bar Shion also if you want. This guy is just way worse than all the other top tiers in season 1. We see that when he tries to use a metal bar against the likes of Gilsoo and Wooyoung, he gets completely destroyed. He also misses a scissor attack on Wooyoung and gets negged. And as for his pen self, he straight up gets blocked by a suppressed Sokdae before he uses his phone. Yes, while he did beat suppressed Sokdae once he used his phone, and also the pot plant, the point is, he was shown to be useless with his pen alone and just got blocked by Sokdae who wasn't even trying. And this is important because with his pen in season 2, episode 2, he's shown to be way better than his season 1 self. We see that in season 2, episode 2 with his pen, he's shown to fight on par with Go Hyun-tak. And I think there's good reason to believe that Go Hyun-tak, even in only episode 2 of season 2, is already better than Suho. And yes, you heard that right. I believe there is good reason to think that Hyun-tak would just completely neg Hyoman. Reason being that in episode 2 of season 2, Gotak throws a kick at Hyoman, but doesn't try to actually hit him. Hyoman doesn't move or react at all and gets his nose skimmed. Since Hyoman can't even move a muscle when Gotak kicks at him, and he gets completely fear-haxed from this kick, we can say he probably wouldn't be able to dodge or block it if Gotak was really trying to land the hit. This is important because of who Hyoman is in character. He's usually very confident and attacks anyone he thinks he can beat, who he also has a desire to take down, as shown with Juntae and Shion. But after seeing how fast Gotak's kick was, Hyoman backed off despite expressing that he had a desire to take down Gotak. Instead of fighting Gotak one-on-one, he made a whole-ass plan to fight him with his goons. The fact that Hyoman got scared of Gotak's kick shows just how dangerous it was, because Hyoman is usually cocky and ready to fight anyone he thinks he can beat. If he was really afraid of that kick, it means the kick was something to be feared. So we can say Gotak's kick would have landed if he had tried to hit him seriously. And yes, for those wondering, it wasn't that Hyun-tak just couldn't reach Hyoman with his kick. It's that Hyun-tak purposely tried not to hit him, as it was shown that Hyun-tak didn't want to fight then and there, as he invited Hyoman to the gym so they could fight. He threw the kick purely to shut up Hyoman's trash talk, and wanted to go to the gym for the actual fight. While it may seem like Hyoman froze up because he didn't expect the kick and was caught off guard and just got shocked and scared, and therefore wouldn't have been blitzed if that kick was thrown at him in the real fight. If that were true, we'd expect him to quickly shake it off and act like his usual confident self. Instead, after that moment, Hyoman drops his usual confrontational attitude and refuses to fight Hyun-tak one-on-one, choosing to attack with his goons instead. This shows it wasn't just some temporary jump scare-like reaction. The kick was so fast and threatening that it made Hyoman seriously reconsider facing Hyun-tak directly. So because of how Hyoman literally didn't move a muscle when Gotak kicked him, coupled with the fact that he dropped his usual cockiness after experiencing that one kick alone, we can conclude that it's most likely the kick would have just rocked him. Why does any of this matter though, you may be asking? Well, that's because of Hyoman's scaling. Remember how I said that Hyoman and Shion, when he analyzes his opponent's shoulder, are relative? Well, we see Wooyoung fight Shion when Shion analyzes his opponent's shoulder, and Shion is able to actually dodge an attack and tackle him. While he does get beaten up after and didn't really do much, this is more than Hyoman would hypothetically be able to do against Gotak, since as I explained, Gotak would be able to instantly blitz Hyoman, as the first and only kick alone made Hyoman back down, meaning it would have been enough. If we think about it, Gotak would be able to destroy Hyoman harder than Wooyoung destroyed Shion when Shion analyzed the shoulder. Since Gotak can blitz Hyoman, whereas Wooyoung, before he lands a hit on shoulder analyzing Shion, gets an attack dodged and tackled, showing he struggled more. And Hyoman's fight with that version of Shion, as I explained, was inconclusive, so they're relative. So even episode 2 Gotak can destroy a relative opponent harder than Wooyoung can, and Suho and Wooyoung were extremely relative. As for Suho's injury, There's no way to really quantify how much better his non-injured self would be, and we see Wooyoung is shown to press Suho even before he exploits Suho's injury, and Suho's injury only shows effect when it's exploited anyway. So yeah, Season 2 Episode 2 Gotak already has better feats than the likes of Wooyoung, who Suho is super relative to, and Season 2 Episode 2 Shiun is shown to fight relative to Season 2 Episode 2 Gotak. Therefore, Shiun's pen self from Episode 2 Season 2 and onwards is much better than both his pen self and standard weapon self from Season 1. Since, as I said, in Season 1, his pen attack gets literally blocked by a Sokde who's holding back, but in Season 2 Episode 2, he's able to fight on par with Season 2 Episode 2 Gotak, who, as I explained, is capable of negging Hyoman, a feat far more impressive than anything Sokde could do, which shows he improved with his pen. Above Season 2 Episode 2 Shiun and Gotak would be Choi Hyoman when using a metal bat. Hyoman with the bat was able to defeat Pen Shiun, who Gotak stalemated, so Hyoman with the bat would be above these two. Above we have Season 2 Episode 4 Gotak. Gotak in Episode 4 of Season 2 was shown to have surpassed his Episode 2 self, as he was able to land a hit on Gum Songjae, whereas we see Yeon Shiun with his pen attempt to fight Songjae and get completely wrecked and unable to land a single hit on Songjae until he uses the plant pot and glasses combination. And we know Gotak in Episode 2 was on a similar level to Shiun. So Gotak in Episode 4 of Season 2 performs better against a common enemy than post-Episode 2 Pen Shiun does. The reason he'd be above Metalbat Hyoman is because he outperforms Shiun against Songjae, and Metalbat Hyoman, while he did beat Shiun, still was held off by Shiun quite a bit and struggled to land a hit on him, therefore they're relative. So Hyuntak scaling above Pen Shiun would by extension put him above Metalbat Hyoman. At the top of this tier would be base Gotak from Season 2 Episode 8. Gotak was shown to train before Episode 8, so he would have surpassed his Episode 4 self, though it's unquantifiable how much better he is, since in his base he gets destroyed by the likes of Dongha and Songmok. And now in this tier, this is where things get a little controversial. We have Shiun with a shoelace amp, Enraged Wooyoung, and Peak Weight Room Shiun. These three fighters are all kind of in the same ballpark. I believe that these three versions of Shiun and Wooyoung are above Suho and the aforementioned fighters. Hear me out on this. So we see that in his base, Shiun gets completely slapped by base Wooyoung, but when he manages to get a hold of Wooyoung's shoelace, he manages to take Wooyoung down, tie his shoelace around his throat, drag him around by the neck, and whack his head into the weights. In fact, we actually see that Wooyoung is completely helpless here. He's unable to break out and gets his head slammed. But only after this, he gets some sort of rage amp and begins to elbow Shiun, something he wasn't able to do beforehand, and eventually breaks free. Because of the fact that he was clearly shown to be unable to break free from Shiun before he got his head slammed on the weights, coupled with the fact that he, after getting out of Shiun's shoelace, is screaming with rage, we can infer that he was able to break out of Shiun's shoelace due to a rage amp. Basically, we see Wooyoung get straight up outperformed and get his head slammed on the weights, but after that happens, Shiun isn't able to get the upper hand again, and Wooyoung instead breaks out filled with rage. So it's most likely the factor that allowed him to go from getting slammed by shoelace Shiun to breaking free was his rage. But after Wooyoung breaks out of Shiun's shoelace, Shiun is eventually able to dodge out of the way, grab the dumbbell and secure the win. So the scaling would be this: Peak Weight Room Shiun over Enraged Wooyoung over Shoelace Shiun, way over base Wooyoung relative to Suho and other Season 1 top tiers. The reason that Peak Weight Room Shiun, Enraged Wooyoung, and Shoelace Shiun are above the previous tiers like Episode 4 Gotak is because Shoelace Shiun, the weakest out of those three, can neg a stronger opponent than the fighters of the previous tier can. The previous tier are all relative to the likes of Season 2 Episode 2 Go Hyuntak, since Hyuntak fights on par with Shiun, who's able to hold off Metal Bat Hyoman, and we know that Hyuntak is capable of negging base Choi Hyomyan. Oh my gosh, what the hell did I just say? Base Choi Hyoman, as I explained. But Shoelace Shiun negs base Wooyoung, who scales higher than base Choi Hyoman, as he defeats Shiun when in shoulder analyzing mode, the same Shiun who Hyoman is equal to, as I explained. So Shoelace Shiun would be above the likes of Season 2 Episode 2 Gotak, Metal Bat Hyoman, and Season 2 Episode 2 Shiun, due to negging a stronger opponent, namely Wooyoung. And as for Shoelace Shiun being above Season 2 Episode 4 Go Hyuntak, Hyuntak is still relative to the other people in this tier, as while he does land a hit on Gum Songjae, he gets completely destroyed by him for the most part, just like post Season 2 Episode 2 Shiun, whose Shoelace Shiun upscales because of reasons I've already given. And episode 8 base Gotak, as I explained, is just unquantifiably better than his episode 4 self. So Shulei Xian and Enraged Wooyoung scale above the previous tier. Wooyoung, when enraged, as I said, would be above Shulei Xian, as he did eventually break out and wail on him. But he is just right next to him because although Enraged Wooyoung did outscale Shulei Xian at the end, he didn't by any means destroy him, as he struggled a lot and it took him multiple elbows and 2 throws to get out of Xian's grasp. And Xian was strangling him to death the whole time he tried to break out. So Xian definitely didn't make it easy for him, so the two are definitely relative. Similarly to how Enraged Wooyoung isn't way above Shulei Xian, peak weight room Xian isn't too much higher than Enraged Wooyoung, and is still relative to him. As while he does eventually dodge out of the way and slam a dumbbell onto Wooyoung, he got comboed and took several hits from Wooyoung before he was able to do this, so the two are still relative. So with this, it should follow that Shulei Xian, Enraged Wooyoung, and peak weight room Xian are all around the same level. And now, above those three, we have base Gum Songjae, the absolute menace. This guy is insanely strong. And the reason he's above the likes of Shulei Xian, Enraged Wooyoung, and peak weight room Xian is because he completely negs post season 2 episode 2 Pen Xian, who, as I've already explained, scales above base Wooyoung, who Shulei Xian only negs. So Songjae would be above due to negging a stronger opponent than Shulei Xian did. And as for the other two, like Ray Jump Wooyoung and peak weight room Xian, I've already explained how they're all kind of more or less on the same level, so Songjae upscaling Shulei Xian would by extension put him above those two as well. Now tied with base Songjae would be Xian in season 2 episode 4 with his glasses amp. Xian, when he gets an amp from using Songjae's glasses as a weapon, is able to blitz Songjae's foot and exploit the foot injury before Songjae improves and disarms his glasses self the round after, whereas his base pen self got destroyed by Songjae. While it might seem like Xian was only fast enough to strike Songjae with the glasses because Songjae was blinded, that's just not the case. It's true that Xian was able to grab the glasses due to Songjae being momentarily disoriented, as shown by the fact that earlier in the fight, Xian couldn't even get close to landing a hit, and Songjae literally had his eyes closed when that happened. However, a crucial moment shows Songjae looking directly at Xian and attempting to strike him, only for Xian to duck the blow and instantly counter by stabbing his foot with the glasses. Some might argue that Xian dodging and blitzing Songjae is just more proof that Songjae's vision was impaired. And that's a fair assumption, since up until this point Xian was just getting destroyed and couldn't land any hits on Songjae, whether that be with the pen or his fists. But here's the thing. Xian has a track record of gaining notable speed boosts when he uses specific weapons. A good example of this is in Season 1, Episode 8, when he couldn't land a hit on Wooyoung using standard weapons like scissors, but the moment he gets a hold of Wooyoung's shoelace, he suddenly blitzes him, tying the lace around his neck and slamming his head into the weights. So when you combine that precedent with the fact that Songjae was fully aware of Xian's possession and actively swung at him just before being blitzed, the more reasonable interpretation is that Xian received some kind of speed or reaction amp from wielding the glasses, rather than Songjae being visually impaired at that point. Yes, it's likely that Xian wouldn't have even had the chance to grab Songjae's glasses if Songjae wasn't briefly blinded earlier, but it doesn't change the fact that once Xian has the glasses, the version of him that we're scaling, he's clearly operating on a different level. Before that moment, Songjae completely overwhelms him. Afterward, Xian is fast enough to blitz and match Songjae in combat, despite Songjae actively tracking him. Now some people might say, Xian only did good because Songjae was injured and vulnerable. If he wasn't, Xian would have been destroyed, but that argument doesn't really hold up when you think about it. The key detail here is that Xian is the one who created that vulnerability during the fight, specifically by stabbing Songjae in the foot with the broken glasses. Think of it like this. Imagine two fighters go at it, and during the match, Fighter A manages to break Fighter B's arm. After that, Fighter A keeps targeting that arm to win. You wouldn't say, Fighter A only won because Fighter B had a broken arm. That's missing the point. The injury didn't exist before the fight, it was created by Fighter A in the fight. So if Fighter B couldn't stop that from happening, that's simply a flaw in his performance, not an excuse. The same logic applies to Xian and Songjae's fight. Xian dodged an attack while Songjae was looking directly at him, stabbed his foot, and then pressed the advantage by targeting that injury. If Songjae couldn't prevent Xian from landing that critical blow in the first place, then that's no one's fault but his own, and that's part of the reason why he lost. It's not a fluke, it's a legit win that reflects Xian's ability to exploit openings and turn the tide in his favor. So because of that, Xian with the glasses does in fact scale to Songjae, and it's not a fluke. Now at the bottom of this tier we have Choi Hyoman at his peak. Oh my gosh, this ranking looks crazy. I have Hyoman above base Songjae, Suho, and Wooyoung. This is just crazy. While Hyoman in his base, and even with a metal bat, is just nothing special, Hyoman, once he, I don't even know, just kind of adapts and fights like a retard, has some very good feats. He's able to fight on par and actually press big Dongha, and we see that Dongha is able to completely neg base episode 8 Gotak at the start of the brawl. Compare this to base Songjae's fight with Gotak. Songjae got multiple of his attacks tanked and even took a hit from Gotak in the process. Whereas Dongha completely shit on Gotak and didn't get hit once, and knocked him to the ground in much less hits. And bear in mind, the version of Gotak that Dongha fought would have been better than the one Songjae fought, since we see Gotak train after his fight with Songjae. So Dongha faced a more experienced Gotak. Yes, whilst Gotak did take a hit from Songmok and get off guarded before Dongha negged him, the fact is we see him able to shift his attention to Dongha, retaliate, and get dodged and negged. It's not as if Songmok's hit forced him into a situation where he was repeatedly blasted with attacks from Dongha and couldn't react. He was able to retaliate against the initial off guard from Dongha, but got negged when he did so. And to say he was too weakened to fight properly is just total headcanon, since he shows no signs of being disoriented whatsoever, and we have no way to quantify how much weaker he'd be. And no, we can't use Dongha getting negged by Gotak a few episodes before, because that was Dongha with a weapon and therefore a different version of him. As we see that fighters with weapons are different to their base. So from this we can just conclude that Dongha is worse with a weapon, even if you may find that silly. To say that Dongha couldn't be worse with a weapon is just assuming that weapons must always make you better, which doesn't need to be true. Basically, if we can't prove that Gotak was temporarily stunned against Dongha and at a disadvantage, we would have to come up with some alternative reason for why Dongha was able to win despite losing with a weapon beforehand, and a reasonable alternative that's logically possible is that he's simply worse with a weapon. This is also the show where Gilsu, when using a knife, can't land any hits on Suho, with Suho even mocking him for being slow. But once he loses his knife, he actually beats Suho despite Shion backing Suho up, and laughs in his face. So this shouldn't be too hard to believe. So due to the fact that the idea that weapons must make you better is an assumption that isn't necessarily true, as shown by examples in the show, coupled with the fact that this is consistent with the scaling, we can't appeal to Dongha losing with a weapon as a way to try and downscale him. So Dongha would be above base Gum Songjae and also Glass's Amp Shion, as Glass is Shion tied with base Songjae, who Dongha outscales. And Hyoman would be above base Songjae and Glass's Shion also, due to being relative with Dongha at his peak, being able to make him struggle. And we even see that Dongha has a bruise on his face, and due to the fact that Dongha is shown to only fight Hyoman the whole time, we can conclude that the bruise came from Hyoman. Though Dongha would be better than Hyoman slightly, as he does get the upper hand. Above Dongha though would be Do Songmok. This, if you don't remember the name, is the judo guy. We see that in episode 8, similarly to Dongha, he's able to initially completely destroy Gotak before Gotak switches to fighting Dongha. However, Gotak was unable to dodge or counter any of his attacks, whereas Dongha got one of his attacks dodged. So Songmok outperformed Dongha against a common opponent, thus making him scale above Dongha. At the top of this tier though, we have Go Hyuntak in episode 8 at his best. Gotak at first in his base gets destroyed by Songmok and Dongha individually, but the second time around he challenges Songmok. The two are shown to be instantly relative, showing that Gotak likely improved, with Gotak eventually being able to outlast him and secure the win. And now, at the bottom of this tier, we've got one of Mr. Choi's bodyguards, the one with the brown hair. I jokingly call him the Fat Johan, because he looks like a fat version of this guy called Johan from the K-drama Vigilante. Funnily enough, the other bodyguard, the one with the black hair, also looks like a fatter version of Johan, so I just refer to these two as the Fat Johans, brown head and black head. It might be weird to see these two grown-ass men who have like one fight and get destroyed in it this high, but we gotta understand these two actually have really good feats when we look at it. The brown-haired Johan actually has a solid feat. When he fights Baekjin, he gets wrecked overall, but he dodges a hit and tanks several. That already puts him above Songmok, who fought Baku, who's even weaker than Baekjin anyway, as Baekjin beats him, and couldn't dodge a single attack and got negged. So outperforming Songmok against a stronger opponent makes the brown-haired Fat Johan rank higher. Songmok landing on Baku can be considered an off-guard, since Baku was in the process of turning his head towards him, therefore he had less than ideal time to react. And when he does regain his guard, he destroys Songmok. And this is consistent with the previous scaling of him negging Songmok an episode before, when he wasn't off-guarded. And since Gotak and Songmok are relative, as they went blow for blow and Gotak only narrowly beat him, outperforming Songmok would also scale the brown-haired Fat Joe above Gotak too. Above the brown-haired Fat Joe though would be the black-haired Fat Joe, and here's why. He actually lands a hit on Baekjin, whereas the brown-haired one just dodges. Even though brown-haired Fat Joe shoves Baekjin into the car, he was only able to do this because Baekjin was distracted with the other Fat Joe. He was focusing on the black-haired guy, and the brown-haired Fat Joe is unable to touch Baekjin anytime Baekjin is focusing him. And once Baekjin locks in here, he bodies the brown-haired Fat Joe, showing that this was just because he was distracted. Even then, he did fucking nothing, he just pushed him against the car. It doesn't do anything, really. On the other hand, black-haired Fat Joe actually lands a hit when Baekjin is actively engaged, and even manages to knock him into the car through Baekjin's guard. Whereas anytime Baekjin blocks the brown-haired Fat Joe, he doesn't move an inch. So not only does the black-haired Fat Joe have better skill than the brown-haired Fat Joe, due to actually landing a hit whereas the brown-haired Fat Joe could only evade, but he also on top of that has the power advantage, as he's able to knock Baekjin back further. So yeah, the black-haired one is better all around. And above the Fat Joe, we have peak Gum Songjae and peak rooftop fight Shiun, both from episode 4 of season 2. We see that in his fight against Shiun, Songjae is shown to improve a significant amount. There are a few possible reasons as to why Songjae did so much better, but I believe that the most probable one is that Songjae was holding back at first and then became more serious. This is probable because we see that Songjae is someone who holds back in character. For example, we see him perform significantly worse than he does in episode 4 when he meets Shiun in the bathroom, to the point he couldn't even get the upper hand on a bare-handed Shiun. And he even says that he was only coming to say hi, and that he will pummel him next time they fight. And when he fights Shiun the next time, he negs and disarms Shiun with his go-to weapon, the pen, showing he was in fact holding back that time in the bathroom. While it's not stated that he stopped holding back during the rooftop fight, the fact that he has been shown to hold back in character, coupled with the fact that he all of a sudden just increases in power to an insane extent, I think it's fair to say that he probably got more serious after the glasses stab. But what am I even talking about when I say Songjae did so much better? Let me explain. As I previously explained, we see that Shiun with the glasses straight up dodges Songjae, blitzes his foot, and he's able to then exploit his injury by punching the glasses into his foot. The two scuffle a bit, but eventually they both kind of fall down and stalemate. But the second time around, we see that Shiun, despite Songjae being on the floor and having just been stabbed in the foot, is able to block Shiun's glasses attack, and then the two get back up and Shiun is unable to land any hits on Songjae with the glasses, despite trying multiple times, and he gets completely destroyed while he tries to, eventually leading to Shiun getting disarmed and losing the glasses. This then led to Shiun needing to adapt and do things like catch Songjae's blazer, and eventually headbutt his foot and then headbutt Songjae, leading to a tie. For this reason, peak rooftop Shiun would be tied with peak Songjae, since once Songjae is at his peak, he completely destroys glasses Shiun. But Shiun, when he eventually adapts and improves, is able to tie with that version of Songjae who destroyed his glasses self. Shiun adapted / headbutting equals Songjae peak way over glasses Shiun, relative to base Songjae way over base pen Shiun. And some people may be thinking, Shiun only tied with a serious Songjae because Songjae was injured. If he had gone all out from the beginning while healthy, he would have destroyed him. And I actually agree with the core logic. Yes, a fully serious and uninjured Songjae would beat Shiun, due to the fact that Shiun, even whilst exploiting his injury, only ties with him. So it would stand to reason that a serious, uninjured Songjae would beat his ass, but here's the problem. That version of Songjae doesn't exist in the show. Songjae's base, if that's what you want to call it, is what we see in all his other fights, excluding the bathroom fight where he was heavily suppressing himself, as shown by his performance. But the only time we see him get into this serious state and upscale his base to this extent is after he gets stabbed with the pen, meaning his serious mode is tied to an injured state. That's the version we scale because it's the only version that exists in canon. Saying a serious uninjured Songjae would have won is like saying, if we had used Ultra Instinct Songjae from a parallel universe, he would have destroyed. Like, that's not relevant because it's not the version shown in the story. I'm not ranking these characters based on hypotheticals or what-ifs. I'm scaling the show based on what's actually depicted. And that means working with the versions of characters that are presented, including their injuries, mental state, and their behavior in those moments. If serious but uninjured Songjay never appears, then that version doesn't enter the conversation. Simple as. So yes, hypothetically, a healthy, serious Songjay could beat Rooftop Shion, but that's not weak hero class, that's fan fiction. I'm scaling weak hero, not what if hero. So now that I've gone over serious Songjay's scaling, I'm going to explain why he, along with Rooftop Fight Shion of course, ranks higher than the Fat Joe Hons. The reason why Songjay and Shion rank higher than the Fat Joe Hons is because Songjay is able to destroy Glasses Amp Shion. The Fat Joe Hons do rank above Songmok because they performed better against Big Jin than Songmok did against Baku, who's relative to Big Jin, but honestly they weren't that much help against Big Jin. Although the black-haired Fat Joe Hon did technically land a hit, he didn't really do anything. They were more of an annoyance to Big Jin than a real threat. They still did better than Songmok and Gotak could have done, but it wasn't a big enough difference for them to be considered relative to Big Jin. They still got slammed. This matters because Songmok is weaker than Peak Songjay. Peak Songjay can destroy Glasses Amp Shion, while Songmok can only destroy base Gotak from episode 8. And I've already explained why Glasses Amp Shion is stronger than episode 8 base Gotak. The only real accomplishment of the Fat Joe Hons is being a little less useless against Big Jin compared to how Songmok did against Baku, who's relative to Big Jin. So while the Fat Joe Hons are better than the likes of Songmok, it's not by a lot. They still get beaten badly by Big Jin, just not as badly as Songmok did by Baku, who's relative to Big Jin. So we can conclude that the Fat Joe Hons are still somewhat relative to the likes of Gotak and Songmok. Meanwhile, Songjay clearly outscales Songmok and Gotak because he can take down a much stronger opponent, namely Glasses Amp Shion. Basically, Peak Songjay is clearly above Songmok and Gotak, who the Fat Joe Hons are relative to due to being slightly less useless against Big Jin, but also getting slammed. And of course, Rooftop Fight Shion is relative to that version of Songjay. So the scaling would be this. Rooftop Fight Shion equals Peak Songjay over Songmok relative to the Fat Joe Hons. So yeah, with that being said, Peak Songjay and Peak Rooftop Fight Shion are at the top of this tier. Now in S tier we have the GOATs with the Union Boy who fought Shion placed at the bottom of this tier. Okay, I just want to clear something up first of all. I don't really know if this guy is the Soknam Gorilla or not. If I had to guess, I'd say no, and here's my reason why. When the Soknam Gorilla first appears, the subtitles clearly label him as Gorilla, while the Union Boy is just referred to as Boy. In Weak Hero, once a character's name is revealed, they're usually referred to by that name from then on. For example, Hyoman starts off as Boy, but after his name is revealed, the subtitles consistently call him Hyoman. Same goes for Gilsu, who is first labeled as Man but then later by his name. So if the Union Boy was a gorilla, it would be weird for the show to go back to calling him just Boy. So if I had to guess, I'd probably say no, they're not the same person, but I might just be completely wrong. Okay, I'm gonna be honest, the main reason why I'm just saying he's not the Soknam Gorilla is mostly because I had already made the whole script and 99% of the video by the time I realized he could be the Soknam Gorilla. I literally got to this tier and I was like, wait, is this guy the Soknam Gorilla? Bro, I just immediately assumed that because the subtitles distinguish them that they're not the same person. But that could easily just be a mistake though, because the people who make the subtitles, they're not God, so perfection shouldn't be the standard for subtitles. And they literally wear a jacket with the same logo, this is ridiculous. Now that I think about it, they probably are the same guy, but bro, I cannot be bothered to edit the whole video and correct this placement. I'ma just pretend that he's not the Soknam Gorilla, and I'm gonna rank him how I would rank him had I thought he wasn't the Soknam Gorilla. I don't want to hear it in the comments avoided, he should not be this high, he got one-shotted by Baku. Yes bro, I know. If he's the gorilla, then he should not be this high. I totally agree, the gorilla sucks. But I cannot be bothered to change this. I've spent so much time on this stupid video that'll probably get 100 views anyway, so I can't be fucking bothered to put in this much effort. And you may be wondering, why are you crashing out? What's the big deal? It's because my whole reasoning for the Union Boy who fights Shion in episode 8 being so high is because of the fact that he fights on par with Metal Knuckles Shion, who's able to hold his own against Baekjin. And while Baekjin is injured here, his fatigue would have been unquantifiable. But if this guy is the gorilla, then we can in fact quantify Baekjin's fatigue, since we know that Baekjin, when not fatigued, beats Baku, the same guy who one-shotted the gorilla. This means that if Baekjin wasn't fatigued, he wouldn't have struggled with Metal Knuckles Shion, since he's better than Baku, who one-shots the gorilla, who presses Metal Knuckles Shion. So yeah, you guys can probably now realize how this guy being the gorilla kind of changes a lot. But, For the rest of this video, let's just pretend that he's not the gorilla, just so I can finish this video and go to sleep. So now I'm gonna get into his feats. We see him go toe-to-toe with Metal Knuckles Xian, who in turn holds his own against Baekjin. Yes, Baekjin had just fought Baku and wasn't at full strength, but we can't quantify how much weaker he was, so that scaling still holds weight. At the top of this tier, there would be Injured Baekjin. Injured Baekjin is able to beat Metal Knuckles Xian, so he would be at the top of this tier. This guy literally got his knee struck 1,000,000 times by Xian's Metal Knuckles and still went on to win the fight, which is just crazy. The reason I placed this tier above peak Gum Songjae and peak Rooftop Fight Xian is due to their relative scaling to Baekjin. Baekjin is shown to be relative to Baku, who easily negs Songmok, whereas peak Songjae only negged Glasses Xian, who Songmok is superior to. So the likes of the Union Boy, Metal Knuckles Xian, and Injured Baekjin would scale above peak Songjae due to being capable of negging a stronger opponent. And of course, they'd also scale above Rooftop Fight Xian, as peak Rooftop Fight Xian ties with peak Songjae. So in summary, Songmok over Glasses Xian, Baekjin relative to Injured Baekjin relative to Metal Knuckles Xian relative to Union Boy, Baekjin way above Songmok, peak Songjae / Rooftop Xian way above Glasses Xian. Baekjin is way above a stronger fighter. But now in SS tier we have the absolute GOATs with Baku at the bottom. Baku would be above Injured Baekjin since he's able to fight on par with a healthy Baekjin, so it would stand to reason he'd be above a weaker Baekjin. Baku is a complete beast. He's able to neg the likes of Dongha, Songmok, and is the only person aside from Xian who's shown to put up a fight against Baekjin, and that was on a healthier Baekjin than the one Xian faced. Baku also negs Choi Hyoman, and is stated to be Eunjang's top dog. But at the top of this tier and the entire list, we have Na Baekjin when healthy. This guy is just terrifying. He literally beats Baku out of all people. This guy is basically a guy with maxed out stats. He studies 24/7, is super analytical, and is great in school, and also casually beats the shit out of two grown-ass gangsters because he's too stubborn to go talk to the boss that he'll eventually need to talk to anyway. The guy's just a total menace.